All right, so in this section, we're going to be talking about inequalities involving some quadratic functions. So we're going to start off with an example. We want to solve the inequality x squared minus 4x minus 12 is less than or equal to 0, and then we're going to graph the inequality, the solution set. Okay, so to start off, we need to go ahead and pick out some information about this. So I want to be able to graph this on the the plane over here. Okay, so we're going to first of all try to graph this. All right, so to do that, let's go ahead and pretend that all we're dealing with is x squared minus 4x minus 12 is equal to 0. So we'll ignore the inequality for right now. Okay, so if this is the case, we're going to pick out some information. So the first thing I would do is I would say, okay, so what is the maybe the x-intercept? Okay, so the x-intercepts are where y is equal to 0. It's already set equal to 0. So we simply need to try to factor this. Okay, so you can either factor it or you can use the quadratic formula. I'm going to go ahead and factor it because it is pretty simple to factor. So this would be x minus 6 times x plus 2 is equal to 0. Setting each of these factors equal to 0, we get x is equal to 6 and x is equal to negative 2. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the y-intercept. Okay, so y-intercept is where x is 0, so we're going to say in this case that y is equal to this stuff. So the y-intercept is going to be at negative 12. So y equals negative 12. Right, and so I'm going to go ahead and plot these 3 points on my graph. So I've got 6, which would be somewhere over here. I've got negative 2, which is somewhere over here. And then I've got negative 12 somewhere in here. Right, so now we need to figure out what the vertex is. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the vertex of the graph is going to be. All right, so the vertex is, we're solving for h first. So we've got h is negative b, so b would be 4, negative 4. So we've got negative 4 over 2 times a, which is 1, which gives us 2. All right, so our x value for our vertex is 2, and our y value for our vertex, or our k value, is simply plugging it back into the function, right? So we're going to plug it back in. We get 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 12. That becomes 4 minus 8 minus 12, which would give us, I believe that would be negative 16. Okay, and so I'm going to plot the point of our vertex, right? All right, so I'm going to take a look at this. So this is going to be, we'll do this one in green. So it's positive 2 down 12, and we get it right there. All right, so I can put a couple of other points because I know that this is my axis of symmetry. Okay, so I know that this point can mirror over here, and I can draw my graph. And this is about as accurate as we want to make it. Okay, so we're taking a look at this. All right, now we can start taking a look at what the inequality is actually asking for. Okay, so it says we're looking where the line, so this is a line, in terms of x is less than 0. Okay, so what this means is we're actually looking for where the line is below the x-axis. Okay, so we're looking at where the line is below the x-axis, which is this space here. Okay, so it's this space here. So remember, when you're solving an inequality, or when you're solving something, you're typically solving for the x values. Okay, or when you're looking for something in terms of x, you're solving for the x values. So what we're doing here is we're picking all of the x values that fall below the x-axis. Well, notice that my axis, or my line, starts falling below the x-axis down here at negative 2. and then it stops being below the x-axis up here at positive 6. So my solutions, solution is going to be from negative 2 all the way up to 6, okay? And then because we have this that's inequality sign, so it's or equal to 0, we're actually going to change these brackets, these parentheses to brackets, right? Because we have to include that 0 line. Okay, so my graph is below 0 from negative 2 to 6. Okay, and then if I were to graph the solution set, I'm simply going to do that on a number line. Okay, so the graph, remember, I'm not going to be super picky about how these are graphed. You're simply going to start at negative 2. We're going to fill that circle in. We're going to end at 6. We're going to fill that circle in. And I'm going to highlight in between it. And that's it. All right, so we have one more example to do here. It says we want to solve the inequality 2x squared is less than x plus 10, and then we want to graph the solution sets. Okay, so first thing, the first option that you guys have is to go through this method that we did up here on example number 1. So basically, you're going to set it to 0, and then you're going to solve for the vertex and solve for all those different aspects of it. So that's what we're going to work through the first time. And then looking at option 2, we will, I'll show you guys another method using option 2. Okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to solve for x. We're going to set this whole thing equal to 0. So I'm going to start with 2x squared is less than x plus 10. I want to keep everything positive, or I want to keep my leading term positive, so I'm going to actually subtract everything over here over to this side. So this would become 2x squared minus x minus 10 is less than 0. All right, and then I'm going to look at graphing this. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would find the x and y intercepts. So think of this as y equals 2x squared minus x minus 10 whenever we're finding the information for this graph. So finding the y-intercept, simply plug in 0 for all of my x's, and you get y is equal to negative 10. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and over at negative 10, I'm going to put a point. Okay, then for my x-intercepts, okay, if you're not comfortable with factoring by grouping, I'm going to go ahead and this time use the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b, so this would be 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 1 minus 4 times a, which is 2, times b, which is negative 10, all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 2. I'm going to leave that to you guys in your calculators, but you should get a 2.5 or negative 2. Okay, so those are my two x-intercepts. I'm going to go ahead and plot those two. So negative 2 is over here, and 2.5 is right here. All right, and the last thing I want to go ahead and do is find the vertex. All right, so the vertex is simply h is going to be, let's see, this would be negative 1 over 2 times a, which is 2. So the vertex, the h value would be 1/4. And k, you're going to plug that into the function, and you get negative 10.125. All right, so our vertex would be somewhere right down here. It's just below the bottom of the graph. Okay, and this gives us just enough information so that we can actually come up with the graph. So we can draw our line now. Okay, so we've got our vertex, or sorry, our function, And now we're going to take a look at this. Okay, so this is where we're going to look at what it's asking for. So in this case, it says 2x squared minus x minus 10 is less than 0. So again, we're looking for where this graph falls below the x-axis. So again, if it's less than 0, it means below x-axis. Okay, if it were greater than 0, it'd be above x-axis. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at what part of this graph we're talking about. So if it's below the x-axis, we're looking at everything from here down here. So we're talking about this whole section here. All right, so the solutions is going to be the interval from -2 all the way to positive 2.5. Okay, and then we have to figure out whether we include them, and we determine that again by the inequality symbol in between. So in this case, it's just less than, so we're going to use parentheses instead of brackets. Okay, so the solutions are going to be from -2 to positive 2.5. All right, then we're going to graph this. And again, I'm not going to be super picky on how you graph this, but I do expect to see a minimum of the information that I show you here. So graph. All right, so we're going to start at our minimum point, so -2. We're not going to fill this one in because we are not including those endpoints. We're going to go up to 2.5. And again, we're not including that because it is not included in our solution points. Okay, and that's our graph. So this is ultimately what I'll be looking for. All right, so option 2, it says looking at the graphs. Okay, so what it means by looking at the graphs is I'm going to graph each of these individually. Okay, so I'm going to graph 2x squared, and then I'm going to graph x plus 10. Right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to graph 2x squared in orange. I'll graph x plus 10 in green, and then we'll deal with the inequality. All right, so 2x squared, well, that tells us that we start at the origin. Okay, there's no movements, and then it kind of does this. So it's going to go down over 1 up 2, then it's going to go over 2 up to 8, and that's about all we're going to have room on here to look for. Okay, and we're going to graph this. So we've got this. Just like that. Okay, so this is the graph, f of x equals 2x squared. Okay, then I'm going to take a look at the second one, so x plus 10. X plus 10 is going to intersect at 10, and it's going to be a slope of 1. Okay, so I've got my points that kind of go through like this. Right, and I'm going to draw my line. Okay, so this one's a little bit harder to visualize. All right, so we have an intersection. We know that we're dealing with the points of intersection. Okay, so to do that, we're going to look at, to figure out what we're actually asking for, it's asking where 2x squared is less than or below our line x plus 10. Okay, so in this case, I'll do it in blue. In this case, everything below the green line is going to be right here. Okay, so that's this space here, right? And from before, we are able to tell that the solutions, we have one intersection here, okay, and it's going to stop being below the green line up here. Okay, so we have two spaces where we're below the green line, and we need to write that interval. So in this case, we actually do know that our solutions, again, follow just as they did before, where it's going to be from -2 to 2.5. and then we're going to have the same exact graph that we had in the first one. Okay, so this one takes a lot less work because we're graphing a lot less information. Now, that being said, I'm going to show you guys in class how to do these on the calculator so that you can graph each of those functions on the calculator, and you can determine it on your own. That way we can kind of simplify some of the work that we're doing. We're mostly focused on being able to determine what these solutions are. All right, and that's it for this lesson. Good luck on your homework.